DNA songs then.
Okay.
Parents like Pamela Grundy watched as busing based on race came to an end in Charlotte 6 years ago, and something called the Choice Plan started.
Well, under the Choice Plan, those who could put their kids very quickly into suburban areas.
Right away.
Right away.
Busing ended and people moved their kids right away.
Yes, yes. Busing ended. There was a whole new system. Everybody was reassigned.
That meant wealthier families moved their children to well-performing schools, and poorer families, mostly black and Latino, stayed where they were, crammed into low-performing schools where test scores have plummeted. Educators like John Modest call it the re-segregation of America's public schools, but this time segregation based on class.
I think you saw some white flight and some bright flight.
I'm sorry, say it again. What kind of flight?
White flight and bright flight, where the black middle class folks were leaving too from the schools.
White folk going one direction fast out of town. Middle class black folks.
Yeah, they're going too.
Right behind.
Yeah.
Forced school integration programs peaked in 1980. Since then, it has dropped across the country. School districts in North Carolina, Nevada, Delaware, and Wisconsin have seen the sharpest declines.
Our writing scores improved by 10. Did you?
John Modest is the principal of West Charlotte High School.
We have been deemed a low-performing school by the state, but we're improving.
In the 1970s, West Charlotte was a national model for school integration, 40% black, 60% white. Today, it's 88% black, 1% white.
It's been a blessing for our family.
It happened in part because families like Lori Carter's decided to invest in homes around schools with great reputations. One problem, a lot of families did the same.
The concern in this part of town is overcrowding. The concern in the urban part of town is the needs that those students have. I think the whole idea of forcing integrated schools isn't necessarily going to increase or better the quality of the education.
Remember Pam Grundy? Unlike other parents with means, she didn't move and is keeping her child Parker in a predominantly black school with modest test scores.
We didn't want to be part of the problem. We wanted to try to be part of an effort to improve things for kids at that school.
Forgive me, question, parent to parent. Is that courageous or is it foolish?
We looked at it and we said, this is a good school that needs some help, and we think we can give it that help. And so that's why we made the decision. And we wanted Parker to go to school in the real world.
And with yesterday's Supreme Court decision, a different world that looks a lot like the old one. Byron Pitts, CBS News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
There's still social segregation in schools. I mean, basically, because back in high school, I remember that the cafeteria was just the small amount of black people that were at our school all hung out in the cafeteria.
So, young man, what do you believe? Do you believe the high school that you went to is still socially segregated?
I don't know. I haven't been there in 2 years.
You haven't been there in 2 years. So, when you were there, did you believe it was socially segregated?
Well, what do you think jocks are, and gangsters, and losers, and band geeks? I mean, it's all segregation.
Yeah, but that's
racially.
Oh, well, racially, what do you think?
A little bit. I hung out with you, and you're not white. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
Back at heart, it was socially segregated. There were areas where if you were a certain color of skin, where if you walked through somewhere you wouldn't feel comfortable. I knew a lot of people that were just wouldn't even go in the cafeteria because it was, you just get kind of like looked down upon by all the black kids in the cafeteria, or walk by the bench that was like across from ours, not the bench, but the Mexican bench by the bathrooms. You get yelled at, you get called racial slurs.
Like honky?
Like honky, yeah.
Why do you think there's now little effort to integrate schools across the nation?
Because all the money wants to go other places. People don't care about education as much as other things nowadays. That's what I think.
Where do you believe the money's going to?
Other things that are not a need, would you think?
Do you believe that schools have desegregated in our nation, or have our schools in America still have segregation?
We still have segregation, but it's better than it was 10, 20 years ago. Well, that's to do with the area. It's not forced segregation. It's more like social segregation that's from the neighborhoods that's being brought into the schools. Because, I mean, you have schools in the ghettos and the barrios, and that leads to predominantly Latino and black schools. Whereas here we have New Hall, which is kind of like a barrio, and then Stevenson's Ranch, which is like Whitey McWhiteville, and then you have people in between where it is more diverse. It's not the most diverse place, but it is diverse.
Why do you believe that segregation back then, where there was a different school for all blacks, and then a different school for all whites? Do you believe that those are still here around today?
Well, the students in the schools now are from the post-civil rights, post-women's rights movement, so there's a lot less tension that exists from people born before that movement, from when there was a time where black people had less rights, women had less rights than other people.
With a country that is fighting for equal rights, do you think that our school system in inner cities has increased its equality as schools in suburbia?
No, because all the money, there's a lot more money going to schools in suburbia than that's going to inner cities.
Do you believe the same thing? What do you?
I do, because people don't really care about those people. For some reason, they don't.
I think that in a community where a school would be named after Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks is probably a predominantly black community, because they're such iconic figures in African American culture. I believe that it would be more segregated because black culture is a proud culture, and you prefer to be associated with people that you can be equally proud with. Shit.
Final thoughts.
I really think that generally segregation is a lot different than in the 1960s and 50s before then, but there are still barriers that we have to get over as humans, and get used to that we actually are all equals and not separated by color.